Hello, how are you? Good? Sorry, I'm Karina. I don't know if you remember me. I just need to know if you can commit to passing a budget reconciliation that would include immigration and citizenship for people to be protected, like me and many others. Can you commit to that, Senator? I'm just asking you a simple question.
And that was Karina Ruiz trying to confront Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema on a plane back to Washington, D.C. on Monday. Ruiz says that she is a DACA recipient who once volunteered to help elect Sinema. Now she wants Sinema to deliver on her election promises. The interaction continues with Ruiz looking for answers and Sinema looking like she wants to be anywhere else. Here it is.
Being vulnerable right now to you, my dad passed away. But my dad passed away. My dad passed away last year, and he didn't get to reunite with my family. I don't want to disturb you, but at the same time, I just want to see if I can get a commitment from you, Senator.
Yes, so Ruiz talks about how her father passed away, and even with that, Sinema would not respond with any sort of words. Well, upon landing in Washington, D.C., there was a different activist who approached Kyrsten Sinema, and conveniently, Sinema seemed to get a phone call in the middle of this interaction. Watch.
Hi, Senator Sinema. I want to ask if you can explain to the American people what you're planning on cutting from Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan. Do you want to cut climate priorities? Is it elder care that you want to cut, or is it child care?
Senator, please, we are asking for your help. Senator, we need you.
What are the priorities that you're going to cut? I'm just trying to get an explanation for the American people.
Not exactly a profile in courage there by Kyrsten Sinema. She could have just said, you know what, I don't want to talk about this, but she wouldn't even give that woman the respect of any sort of response. And this has, of course, triggered a huge debate, political media circles, Cenk, about when is the appropriate time or not, if you're an ordinary citizen or you're a journalist, to actually stop a senator and say, look, you haven't outlined what your priorities are. You haven't said what you're going to cut. Give me some information. Give me an answer. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that this is damning of both our politicians and our media. Now, if we had a functioning media in this country, well, the reporters would ask those questions, and if we had a functioning government in this country, politicians would have to answer reporters' questions. But none of that happens. So now, look, guys. In the beginning, yesterday we talked about Senator Sinema got confronted in a bathroom, and that gave everyone in power an easy out. They all came and upbraided everyone and said, "Oh, how dare you? You know, this is you can't go into a bathroom with someone and invade a person's privacy, etc." Now, yesterday on the show, we gave you nuance. John said it was fine. I thought, no, don't follow them into the bathroom, but you should definitely ask them questions in almost everywhere else. And boom, today they deliver. They asked them at the airport. That is perfectly legitimate. Ask them on the airplane, perfectly legitimate. So what's the excuse now for the people in power? They don't have an excuse. And look, guys, you all know it. If Karina Ruiz had come in with a $2,800 check, Sinema would have been all ears. In fact, the reason she's on that plane is because she flew back to Arizona. She gave a very weak excuse of, oh, I have something wrong with my foot. She seemed to be walking fine there in that video, right? I can't see anything wrong with her foot. But of course, what we discovered was that she had a massive fundraiser in Arizona. So she went to talk to people who wrote her $1,000 checks. But if you try to talk to her and you're an actual constituent, a voter, a volunteer who tried to help her before, she's got no interest in you, and she's not going to talk to you under any circumstance. And by the way, guys, sometimes people are off-putting, sometimes they threaten things they shouldn't threaten, etc. It doesn't mean that you have to engage in an hour-long conversation or debate, but a minimum of some sort of politeness, looking into someone's eyes. Honestly, I've never had an interaction with another person where they wouldn't even look at you while you were talking to them, other than Keith Olbermann. So this is the second time I've ever seen that.
Well, and it shows people have, I guess, their own sort of social anxieties or whatever. That may have been the case with Keith, but in Sinema's case, I mean, it shows a basic lack of that she's not ready for prime time, that she should not be a US senator. She should not be at this level. She doesn't have the ability to say, look, I'm not gonna comment. You can hector me, you can question me. I'm just not gonna be able to say anything to you. She should at least be able to go that far. And on the media side of this, I mean, I used to have this sort of arrangement where they were chasing Gary Condit, who was accused in the Chandra Levy case years ago, or whether it was Ken Starr or in the independent counsel investigation. If somebody didn't want to comment, I would say to them, look, you say on camera, sorry, we're not gonna comment on this, or we're gonna badger you, we're gonna hector you, we're gonna follow you at the end of your driveway when you're taking up the trash. We're gonna follow you across the Capitol, Congressman Condit. So you, as a responsible reporter who had respect for the people I was covering, say you choose. You want me to hector you and follow you? That's fine, it makes for great television. And most of the people who are professionals would say, okay, let's do this. You have your camera waiting at the end of the hallway. I'm gonna show up, you throw whatever you wanna say, and I'm just gonna say, no comment. Will that be enough? Okay, at least the politician, the newsmaker is on the record saying they're not gonna comment. But that's, and that may be irresponsible depending on the story, but it's a lot better than not doing anything. Because when you don't do anything, in my view, you start to get journalists, activists who are gonna follow you, not just in airplanes, but also into the bathroom. And I would have said to Senator Sinema, look, I'm gonna follow you into that bathroom unless you are willing to come out of that bathroom and stop and say something. You can't just say absolutely nothing. And the fact that she says absolutely nothing makes, to me, underscores that she's not at the professional, sophisticated level, the savvy level you would expect of a member of the US Senate.
Yeah, but and more than that even, David, she has disdain for her voters.
Right.
For the average American. And you remember that picture of her wearing the F off ring? Now, of course, she never wore that ring when she went to a fundraiser. She would never be that disrespectful to someone bribing her. But to her voters, she wore an F off ring, took a picture, put it on Instagram to kind of rub it in people's face. This was the physical manifestation of that ring. And so the message is loud and clear. That, by the way, why do you think there's polls that shows that Congress is among the most unpopular institutions in the whole country, along with the media? Because from the people in power, we get this constant disrespect. You don't mean anything to me. Your questions are useless, and I'm never going to answer them. I only answer to the people who pay me. We set up a deeply corrupt system that has disdain for all of us. We shouldn't be surprised that we get senators like Sinema out of that system. It was built to create senators like Sinema who only answer to their donors and not to their voters.
And I would argue, Cenk, that Sinema is even worse than Manchin. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, Manchin and Sinema, they go together. At least with Manchin is stopping and talking to reporters and saying, here's my baseline number. You may not agree with it. And he will say, here's what I think should be cut from the $3.5 trillion package to get it down to 1.5 trillion. Sinema won't say anything. She won't say anything to the press. She won't say anything to her constituents. She's not saying anything to the White House about she's willing to cut. And when she does talk to her donors, she's also not going into any sort of details. She's just speaking in platitudes. And as somebody who cares about holding people accountable, I'm right there with you. I think that there should be a dozen journalists chasing her through the airport, wherever she goes now, sticking a microphone in her face and peppering her with these questions. And when she gets sick of being peppered with questions and sick of being hectored, she'll finally realize, okay, maybe I do have to say something, and maybe I do need to outline some basic principles. That would be better than nothing.
And unfortunately, Sinema only responds to power. So again, if you're a donor, she will take your call instantly. That's a fact. There's no question about that. She's gone fundraiser to fundraiser throughout this entire negotiation. And after she voted against the minimum wage theatrically with that swivel thumbs down, she went directly to the National Restaurant Association and collected legalized bribes. And so she doesn't mind putting on a show. She doesn't mind answering to people. She just doesn't want to answer to you.
I agree with you 100%. And I just, at some point, maybe some Democrat or some progressive will say, okay, here's the receipt of the check that I gave you in my last election. Here's the pay stub or whatever it is. And you say, now I want you to explain something to me. And if that's what it takes now to try to get an answer, okay, that'll be the next step. And I'm sure there's a Democratic donor in Arizona or somewhere around the country who's gonna say, I'm not happy with Kyrsten Sinema. She's not talking to her regular voters and citizens and journalists. But she damn well better talk to me after I gave her $2,800 or whatever the max was in the last election. And that person's gonna go up to her and also have a phone recording this. And that's gonna be an even more embarrassing conversation for Kyrsten Sinema, because then the two worlds are gonna collide, both the corruption and the bribery and the fact that she's trying to hide from people.
Yeah, last thing on this. Look, the people in power always have some excuse, and that includes the people in mainstream media. So they say, oh, well, don't go to their house. Okay, fair, I agree. Don't go to the bathrooms, fair, I agree. Okay, then they say, don't yell at them. Okay, well, what do you mean by yelling? Well, don't go accost them in restaurants. Don't do it at an airport. Don't do it on an airplane. Okay, why don't you just say don't do it, right? And if the reporters aren't gonna do it, and you won't let any of the citizens do it, are the only people allowed to talk to politicians in this country their donors? That's an absurd standard. It's an absurd standard. And again, normally people wouldn't have to take this into their own hands. And unlike the right wing, they're like, oh, let's take the law into our own hands and do violence. No, you cannot get any more polite than Karina Ruiz was in that video, or the other person at the airport. They're not taking the law into their own hands. They're asking perfectly legitimate political questions. They're asking them in a perfectly polite way. And the whole country wants to know. And still the people in power go, well, we don't like it. We don't like the people without power bothering the people with power. And remember, the press was supposed to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Does it look that way? Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.